I got a lot of comments on my latest video. Thank you guys so much for doing that. I'm trying to do the Prage thing, but I have a bit of a scuffed situation with my mic right now, so hopefully I'm just like anticipating that it's gonna like yeah, anyway, we're still out here in 2025 being scuffed, okay? It's the same bunny that you're used to. I'm still Bunny from the block. Let's jump into some of your comments. I mentioned that I'm using VS Code as my debugger instead of Emacs, which is my typical editor. For context, I kind of come from the neovim community, and I used to live stream a lot on Twitch. So there's kind of this running joke with that core audience about how if you're a Vim user, you're so elite and you would never touch VS Code. And obviously it's 100% kidding, but it's just like kind of mocking ourselves / mocking Vim users, right? That like you think you're too cool to use this like GUI editor, okay? I kind of left in a remark about how I was shameful in using the VS Code debugger. So that's just to like bring some context to that, okay? I was just anticipating getting flamed by my existing audience for using it. So I will say it is objectively good, okay? I'm not starting actual drama here. It's just a joke. I did get a lot of comments though about Vim users using VS Code's debugger on my latest video. Like a lot of people were in agreement with me. I think it just really speaks volumes to how nice it is to debug your code in a graphical interface. It's just so much easier to really dissect what's going on in the code. It's one spot where the terminal interfaces do fall a little bit short. Let's run through some of the comments here. So Trev Dev said, you don't have to be ashamed for using a different debugger interface. Having spent a fair amount of cognitive overhead stressing over why a thing is not working in Emacs, I know that cost could have been spent on other things. I've had Emacs debugger working in the GUI interface in the past, and if you can get it started in the TUI, I'm sure that you can get it started in the GUI. Good luck and thanks for the video. Yeah, agreed. I'm definitely going to try and put in some work and get the GUI working. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not fully understanding how to configure the GUI, but I do recall that there's somebody else that I remember seeing on Twitch that was also an Emacs user that I'm pretty sure he has some videos on like how to configure the GUI. So I'm probably gonna look into that, and that'll just go in my endless backlog of things that I want to check out. Neonomaly says, a Vim user, but sometimes I'll use VS Code for debugging in languages that aren't my own. True. That makes a lot of sense because it kind of just works. Like it's so easy to get working. Salvage. Salvage says, I also use VS Code debugger. I can't be bothered to set up a debugger for every language and project that I'm working on in neovim. I promptly go back to neovim to continue coding. I do remember that when I was going through the Bash to Basics series with TJ DeVries, he's another YouTuber. Okay, shout out TJ. When I was going through all of that with him, I do recall that there was some way that he was kind of auto managing language servers. I don't remember if there's a programmatic way actually to get the debugger set up though. That would be a great plugin. We need Mason, but for debugging. Okay. Actually, I think Mason is like archived now. Okay, that is my one beef. Okay, someone else mentioned this in the comments. That is my one beef with neovim. I do not miss having packages break on me all the time, okay? Y'all plugin authors, you better relax with all the releases, okay? Maybe it's me. Maybe it was me not reading that it was a major version change, but I'm pretty sure it wasn't. And they do be breaking that API, okay? Be nice to your users, okay? Everyone's crying, they can't keep up. All right, Madman Ali said, I'm too lazy to set up debugging properly on neovim, so I just end up with VS Code when I want to step through. Fair enough. My guy, we've all been there. I use VS Code debugger, no shame. That's from Everlast. Linux Liaison said there should be no shame in using VS Code's debugger. Yeah, maybe it's not as ubermensch as insert your favorite debugger here, but if the debugger they mentioned doesn't work for you, then it's not very useful, is it? Okay, agreed. Okay. Obviously, I have not built an editor from scratch, but like, I'm sorry, what? Like, it's hard. In all seriousness, like, how hard is it really to get the debugger set up more streamlined? Like, I understand that we want granularity with being able to configure a lot of these more personalized developer environments like neovim and Emacs, we want to be able to control those settings at like a very granular level. But I do feel like debugging is pretty, everyone just kind of, it works or it doesn't, you know, like, is there that much tweaking that needs to happen? Is there an option for like dummy mode where we just run it like where it just works? TM. All right. Laughing Vampire says, no shame on using VS Code's debugger. To the contrary, Microsoft has excellent debuggers. Visual Studio was an amazing project and had the best debugger for a while. And then during that time of IE 11, that was the best JavaScript debugger. When JS code was minified and in a single line, it selected just the statement, not the entire line. I hate Windows, but Visual Studio was a good thing. The new versions suck because they're so slow, but VS Code is good, not that bad. Ooh, let's go. Getting some Microsoft love in here. Let's freaking go. Linus Thorcell says, as a fellow terminal editor, aka neovim user, I also shamelessly open VS Code for debugging. It's just too good to not use for that task. It is so good, okay? Life's easy. Life's easy. It just doesn't. It is funny though. It is funny to me how I see the problem in my debugger and then I immediately open up Emacs to fix the problem and then go back to the debugger and see if it's still, see if it's still an issue or whatever. I'll like run the test and then go back to the debugger if it's still an issue. But like, it is kind of funny to me that I'm like, I am so used to my motions from my normal editor that when I go to type in something where I don't have any of the keybinds or anything, like it's not in Vim mode or anything like that, just plain old VS Code. Like I got my cat with shoes on, that's me in that editor. Okay, Beverly says, I have to admit that also sometimes I use VS Code too, not always Vim. Ooh, we're out here with the spicy confessions. This is like a confessional that I've summoned from all the people from the neovim subreddit. Everyone's like, I'm also secretly a VS Code user. Like, I'm telling TJ about all of you, okay? Be prepared. Yeah, my friend TJ, he literally on his streams has like a beep, like a sensor beep for when he says VS Code. Like, it's just a running joke in the Twitch community, okay? I'm sorry. I'm sorry for offending people. All right. Frustrated Alien said, I write Python/C++ professionally, and I use VS Code as my primary editor because it just works most of the time, especially while remote debugging. True. Attaching a headless server to VS Code is easy, is nice. I have to do that quite a bit for if I'm debugging an interactive application. For example, if I've got any like bubble tea programs, it basically takes over standard in and standard out. So it like gets a little bit confusing when you're debugging. You have to kind of run the debugger in headless mode and then connect to it like remotely, connect to that server. Anyway. Okay, my corporate machine is a Mac, but 99% of my development is done on 2 Debian VMs, one in the cloud and one other local. I still use Vim and neovim for smaller personal projects, but that's because I can spend time to set things up or learn as I go. When I'm working professionally, I want to get stuff out as fast as I possibly can, regardless of the tools. Of course, it is a skill issue. If I was great at neovim, I'd probably have found a way around this, but you don't have to frame it as a spicy take. VS Code is awesome. Okay. Yeah, true. It felt spicy. I was like, dude, I actually literally thought I was going to get like burned at the stake for that one. Okay. I'm not going to lie. I think it's probably because my friends haven't seen my video. They're not watching my content, so it's fine. Okay. I was like, I'm going to get roasted on their streams and I'm never going to know about it. Yeah. Okay. We had Metascope calling me out saying, what's wrong with VS Code's debugger? And the answer is absolutely nothing. Okay. VS Code's debugger is objectively good. Think and Speak says, why is using VS Code shameful? If it does the job, why do you have to use some garbage tool to be proficient? Besides, it's not the debugger that has the skill. That was weird to see. Okay, yeah. I think they're not from the community that understands the VS Code censorship, yada, yada. This is getting into like a broader programming audience. So yeah, sorry for the confusion. But yeah, no, VS Code, good editor. We support you. I'll actually link a blog post in the description. I have one of my old coworkers. He always used VS Code. He's like a 10x developer. Okay, I swear. And VS Code was his editor of choice. And he had some pretty cool configurations. I'm trying to remember what specifically he was doing, but I remember it really stood out to me as like being sick. VS Code's also really incredible for pairing. I know you can also do pair programming like through a Tmux session or something like that. But yeah, it has some pretty killer features. I'm not going to lie. It's a great editor. And I will link Musely's blog post in the description, because I do remember that when I saw it at the time, I was like, that is pretty outstanding. So yeah, I think it was like a remote dev environment or something like that. Anyway, thank you guys so much for responding to my videos. It's so nice. I'm so used to live streaming on Twitch. So to me, it feels like I'm not used to this kind of like asynchronous communication way of doing things like you do on YouTube with comments. So this is my way of trying to adapt to this new way of doing things, and hopefully you enjoyed. Hopefully it's fun to see your own comments and my reactions to your comments. I was looking kind of for like other people's tips for learning a new code base, and I got some really nice comments from various members of the community on different ways that they learn new code bases, whether it's an agreement with me, whether it's some other tip. So let's jump into their tips and tricks. All right, Nauru first stated, understanding the data structures and data flow first also helps me a lot. Often the program logic is self-evident from that. There are some relevant quotes, such as the one from Fred Brooks, The Mythical Man Month from 1975. This one states, show me your flowchart and conceal your tables, and I shall continue to be mystified. Show me your tables, and I won't usually need your flowchart. It'll be obvious. So if you show me the data, show me the data structures, show me your SQL tables, I will probably be able to piece together what this piece of software is about. I could see that. I mean, obviously naming is hard, and naming would be an important part of that, but I totally agree. And, you know, as somebody who hasn't had to work on very many code bases that have really extensive databases or anything like that to me is not something that would have come up as an obvious tip. I think obviously experience is valuable here, and that is not my experience because I just haven't had that experience yet. But next time that I work on a project that has a pretty significant amount of data that's being stored, I will definitely be looking at those tables first, okay? And then he's also got a quote from Linus Torvalds that says, bad programmers worry about the code, good programmers worry about data structures and their relationships. That is typically what I'm drawing out when I'm looking to try and figure out what is going on. If you want to see what my notes actually look like, I'll link the video that all these comments are from. I also show what my notes kind of look like when I'm trying to figure out a new code base or like debug something. Okay, Soma says, checks out C++ project, searches for tests, none. Looks for docs, none. Code style, YOLO. Makes PR, no reviews. Then they go, ignored. Okay, I'll just rewrite this thing in Rust. Bro, I was seeing so many comments like that. I made a short that was just like one little snippet from this longer video talking about how the first place that you look in a code base to try and understand it is the tests. And then I got so many comments being like, there are no tests, there's no documentation, help. I'm like, okay, you guys are like full on in the trenches. I feel for you, okay? That is pure pain. I actually think that if you're in a situation like that, like part of your, I don't know if you'd be doing like sprints or something like that. I'll assume that you will. If you're doing sprints, I would almost advocate for having a certain amount of story points per sprint just dedicated to like code cleanup, code improvement. That said as well, you don't have to do the whole thing at once, okay? Maybe if you're adding a new feature or fixing a bug for like one small part of the code base, like whatever you touch, maybe you can like add comments to that, add a test for that, for things that you've had to like touch with that change, or even things that you had to look through to figure out how to make that fix or make that change. That's what I would do if I was in that situation. But y'all are in the trenches for real. Okay, make sure that you got health benefits. Like you're gonna need some like emotional support. You're gonna need some therapy after that. That sounds absolutely brutal. Okay, we also had Dylan say, in my opinion, I usually look at older pull requests. This helps me a lot. This is actually something that I do quite a bit, and I don't think I've published the video where I mentioned this already. Maybe by the time you're watching this, I have. But I do also really like to look through pull requests. It's actually one way that I'll try and learn if there's a feature or something that I'm like, ooh, how on earth would you fix that? How on earth would you implement that? I 100% will check out the PR when that issue is closed. And I just look through it and I'm like, okay, it kind of like demystifies the problem a little bit, because sometimes it's easy to be intimidated by these things and then just like kind of be scared of it and run away. But I do also really like looking through different people's PRs. I've found that through PR review at work, it's actually made me a much better programmer. Much better than if I was reading books like Clean Code and all these things where it kind of like shows best practices. I mean, those are great, like foundational things. But at the end of the day, if you have 10x developers that you're working with, just like read their code and see what stands out to you, like what makes it easy for you to understand, what makes it hard for you to understand, what you like and not like. It's okay for everyone to have like a bit of their own flair to their how they write code, right? And you can kind of pick and choose from other people's ways and styles of like what stands out to you and what makes the most sense to you. So that's my little tip on that as well. Supreet came in saying RTFM in the nicest way possible. They said, one tip I would like to add, projects such as the Linux kernel have a lot of documentation and websites online that clearly define how we should do certain things. Search the web and read the manual for anyone who's trying to contribute to any project, and do that before you reach out to a maintainer to ask questions. Take your time, and with time, you'll get good. True. Trying to rush through things is not the way. Sometimes I can find myself being a little too chaotic when I'm trying to code, especially if I'm doing it on stream. It's like I need to figure it out faster, and most of the time you actually just need to like take a step back, and it's when you walk away or when you mentally allow yourself to slow down a bit that you go like, oh, hold on, I know how to fix that. It's kind of a funny phenomenon, actually. Oetsy! Okay, Oetsy's an OG. So hi, Oetsy. Thank you for commenting. I also use SourceGraph to see how others code things, so I can code similar code. So when I see code the next time, I can adapt faster. Oh, and pen and paper is very, very strong. Yeah, SourceGraph is really nice for being able to get actual examples. I know a lot of projects don't really have a ton of example usage, especially if they are lacking in tests and documentation. I do really like to use just SourceGraph's like global public code search to figure out how other people are using that library in their projects. Oh, interesting. Okay, this person does not have a username. Interesting. Okay. I never thought of looking at tests first. Interesting approach. I've always just read the code I was interested in from top to bottom. I feel like this is the default behavior when you're thinking, okay, I need to learn this new code base. You just kind of like read through it and you're trying to figure it out as you read through it. But personally, I get kind of bored doing that. I need a little bit of chaos, a little flair of chaos when I'm learning things. Otherwise, it's boring. So personally, I found that if I just read things from top to bottom, I didn't find it as engaging. And then it also, I guess like as a result, it felt like it was taking forever. Whether it actually took longer or not, I can't say for certain. But this is something that, if you are somebody who's just really thorough and is happy to just read things top to bottom and try and understand it as you go, then good for you. I'm proud of you. Even when I read textbooks, I like jump around different chapters. Like if I do it in order, sometimes what happens if I do it in order is then I take a break for a bit and then I forget what I've read, and then I'm like, oh, I can't quite remember. So then I start again from the beginning, and then I've read the first half of the book like 12 times, none of the last half of the book. So yeah, I can't do that, but some of you can, and 59 people agreed. Aguera says, I feel like pen and paper for code are about building your reasoning around a problem from scratch or from where you're reading it. I've always used it to iterate and design stuff, and one efficient digital equivalent of it for me has been simply to write it down even in the computer. I've been using Obsidian as I like how it renders and also has these canvases in which you can visually build mind maps. Okay, I'm so curious about this because I've heard about the mapping that you can do with Obsidian. You can basically like link different files and link to, I think, different like terms or headers or whatever in different files. So it does become almost like this wiki. Anyway, that's a really interesting feature. I think that's pretty much the feature for Obsidian that like really lets it stand out against other Markdown readers. But you can visually build mind maps and reference existing notes you have somewhere else. It's almost like the Pepe Silva meme by the end of it. I'll have to look up that meme. I don't know which one specifically. I think graphs, as in the node and edge thing, are overall really helpful, but building the graph on your own is what actually gets it into your brain somehow. True. Because I feel like at a certain point, you have to engage with what you're learning, right? You can't just like consume and expect that it's going to solidify. You have to have like consumption and output, input and output. Edits by Shabby, it says, dude, the pen and paper thing is so underrated. Every time it's gotten confusing for me, I'll always write it down and then I just see the whole flow. True dat. All right, Will, also back in the whole pen and paper. All right. I love a good old pen and paper. I never reference most of the notes I write, but the act of creating it is great for my learning. Yeah, 100%. And then Sven says, reading tests for understanding the code is good, but even better is writing new tests. 100%. As I just said, input and output is going to be the best way to learn. Typically, I will write new tests. If there's a new thing that I'm going to work on, I'm a little unfamiliar, I at least need to get a conceptual understanding of like, okay, what specifically do I want to look at? What specific behavior do I want to see? And that usually means creating a new test. And not all of the projects that I work on have like 100% coverage, nor do I think that 100% coverage necessarily always makes sense. Like, you should be testing functionality. Test like features. Test if there's a bug, make sure that edge case is covered. But like, you're not testing, I don't think you need to at least, test like helper functions and things like that. You want to test like the core functionality that you need to work for this thing. Oh my God, I'm not gonna be able to come up with an example right now. If that helper is failing, you can debug that from the test, from whatever more main piece of functionality is using that helper function. You'll be able to see if that test is failing, you can debug that easily to pinpoint that it's the helper function that's failing. A practice that lets me quickly understand the parts of a system that I was new to was to write some tests, especially high-level integration tests. Okay, interesting. Often I didn't really know what assertions I should really put into the test, but guessing the right assertions and seeing whether they pass or not is great for understanding a new code base quickly and deeply. That way you get a fast feedback on whether you're thinking in the right direction or not. This practice works miracles in languages with a strong static type systems, my favorites, okay? I much prefer that, where the types already tell you a lot about what to expect from a certain function or module, 100%. The story might have been much different in a weak or dynamic type systems, which is part of why I generally avoid these as much as possible. Dude, 100%. The fact that like your function signatures tell you how to use a function, tell you what you need to know to use that function effectively is game changing. I don't know what's happening. I'm dying coughing. So I'm going to end this video there. Thank you all so much for sharing your tips for learning a new code base. And I appreciate all your support. If you want to see the original video where all these comments came from, I will have it linked up here. Otherwise, I will see you next time. Bye-bye.